Alright, ladies and gentlemen, now that we have this $1,500 gaming PC all booted up and ready to go, let's talk about a couple benchmarks real quick. Now, we decided to test this PC in a couple of titles, those being Fortnite, Call of Duty Cold War, Apex Legends, and Borderlands 3. First up with Fortnite on performance mode, which I've been told is the new pro setting, so we're going to run with it. We got well over 300 plus FPS. I was definitely expecting really good results in a game like Fortnite because that i7-10700 has really good IPC, and regardless of what GPU you're throwing in there, if you're running on performance mode, you're leaning much more on that CPU. So it's really easy to get 300 plus FPS in your favorite esports titles like Fortnite, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, or CSGO, or anything like that. So this PC is perfect for that, but one thing you probably are seeing in that top left corner is the temperatures. This PC has two issues when it comes to temperature management. One, the fact that there's only an exhaust fan. There's no intake fan on this build, which is really weird for such a big case, considering, well, it needs more airflow, obviously, and it has some higher power components. And the second thing being that CPU cooler, because that i7 is actually downclocking down to about 4.2, 4.3 gigahertz to make sure it doesn't overheat and hovering in the high 80s, which isn't ideal. It's not going to kill the CPU or anything, but it's not great for the long-term support of it, and also the fact that you're losing free performance that HP could be giving to you for that money if they just slapped on a better cooler. In a game like Fortnite, we're really only stressing the CPU, especially when we're on performance mode. So, as you see in the later benchmarks, we start to see where the GPU gets up towards the 80s a little bit more, and the CPU gets up towards the 80s, and that whole thing turns into a little bit of a heat box. Now, is it to the point where you can't use it? No, it is definitely still usable even in the high 80s, but it is something to consider, maybe getting a better cooler for this thing, or maybe slapping in another fan, which there is a way to add another fan at the top. It does appear, at least, where you can unscrew one of these covers that looks to be designed for an AIO for some of the systems that do come with AIOs, and you could slap in another 120mm fan and potentially get some better temperatures, but it is kind of a shame that off the shelf you have to do stuff like this. Next up, in Call of Duty Cold War on medium settings, we got well over 100 plus FPS. Call of Duty Cold War is a more demanding game, and this is where the 2060 Super can start stretching its legs. Yes, it is an older GPU, it's a 2000 series GPU, but given the market right now, getting any sort of GPU that's somewhat high-end, even 2000 series, is not easy at all, especially with the scalper market in cryptocurrency mining. So having a 2060 Super is still a beautiful thing to have. It has that new NVIDIA encoder that's absolutely great for live streaming, and it can play pretty much any game you throw at it, as you can see. The next game we tested was Apex Legends, and on high settings, again, we got over 120 FPS. As I mentioned before, this thing is perfect for esports titles and some other games at 1080p and even some 1440p gaming if you really wanted to. That 2060 Super, as I mentioned, has a lot of headroom to play a lot of games that you would want to at higher refresh rates. As you saw with Call of Duty Cold War and Apex, we start to see the temperatures of the GPU reach 80 degrees Celsius. I really don't know if that has to do with the case cooling or just the GPU in general, because it is a OEM version of the 2060 Super, meaning it has a single fan, which isn't ideal for a card like a 2060 Super, but again, it's within NVIDIA's spec. It's not going to totally kill the GPU when it's running at 80 degrees Celsius, because that is within normal operating range, but you might be losing some performance compared to an aftermarket solution and going with another company that may have off-the-shelf components. And last but certainly not least is Borderlands 3, and on high settings with the built-in benchmark, we averaged 81 FPS. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this PC. The cooling does leave some concern in my mind. This video was mainly to open up the idea of considering HP Omens for your next gaming PC purchase, and we wanted to buy one that was on the shelf ready to go, and this one was our option, but I do know they sell some with liquid cooler, some with a front fan for better temperature control, and those will probably be the ones I would lean towards compared to this one, because if you don't want to have any headaches and you don't want to leave any performance on the table, you want to make sure all your components are nice and cool. So definitely check the link in the description down below. We'll be linking this PC and some other alternatives for you to look at home if you're looking to pick up an HP Omen, because overall they're really well built. If the temperature thing was under control, it would be a no-brainer to pick this thing up. So now that we finished the benchmarking section of today's video, how are we going to bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick?